One of my favorite foods to cook in a Dutch oven are biscuits. I've gathered probably 15 or 20 different recipes, and they're all very similar. I come across one here recently, though, that uses a different kind of flour. So I'll be using a high-protein flour from King Arthur. This is going to have more gluten in it and have more structure to the biscuit once it's cooked. So come along with me and we'll try and figure out if this is one of the best biscuits we've ever eaten.
Almost all the recipes that I've used for baking biscuits include flour, a leavening agent, usually in the form of baking powder, liquid, and fat. For this recipe I used 3 cups of King Arthur all-purpose flour, 4 teaspoons of baking powder, half a teaspoon of baking soda, 2 tablespoons of sugar, and only 1 teaspoon of salt since I'm using salted butter. I'm using 2 full sticks of butter. I place the butter in the freezer for 20 minutes or so to get it good and cold. This will allow me some working time with it as I grate it. As you can see, it grates nicely when it's cold. Once the butter is grated, I mix it into the dry ingredients. Being careful not to handle it too much for fear of melting the shredded butter.
He's the cowboy man who never hides. It's his lasso, he'll round him up. No cowman, he can't disrupt from sunrise until the moon's high.
To this mixture, I'll add 1 1/4 cups of very cold buttermilk. The cold buttermilk will help keep the butter cold as I continue to mix the dough. The 1 1/4 cups of buttermilk does not make this a very wet dough. This mix is fairly crumbly, as you can see. I dump the dough onto a floured cutting board. I'll form the dough into a square around 6 or 7 inches across and begin to roll it out. As I'm forming this dough into a square, I'll try and handle it as little as possible to keep that butter nice and cold. I'll use a rolling pin that I've rubbed some flour on to keep it from sticking too much to the dough. You'll notice how crumbly the mix still is. At this point, it's a chore to fold it over. With each subsequent rolling out and folding, I can tell that the dough is beginning to fight me a little bit as the gluten continues to build up and become stronger in the dough. I'll repeat the folding and rolling process perhaps 6 or 7 times. I'll have to say that this much working of the dough is foreign to me in biscuit making. Typically, you want to work the dough very little as not to make your biscuits tough. Leavening in quick breads is activated as soon as your liquid component is mixed with the baking powder. So working quickly is a key to a light, fluffy biscuit. In this case, the butter will help create the light, flaky texture by releasing steam as the temperature rises during baking. After my 6th round of rolling and folding, I rolled the biscuits out to about 3/4 of an inch thick. This is a bit thinner than the 1 inch I usually choose. I'm using a 2.5 inch biscuit cutter to cut out my biscuits. I'm baking these guys in a 10-inch Dutch oven in a 400-degree home oven. I'll let them bake for about 25 minutes. I had enough dough left over for several more biscuits that I placed on a small cookie sheet alongside the Dutch oven on a rack. I tried the same recipe using a 12-inch camp oven in an outdoor setting using hardwood charcoal for the heat. I still had dough left over even with the 12-inch, so this recipe would easily work for a 14-inch Dutch oven.
As always, when we're cooking with a Dutch oven, we need to make sure that we're rotating our lid and our Dutch oven in different directions from time to time to make sure that we don't have any hot spots with these coals. So I will take the lid and give it a turn, about a 1/4 turn to the right, clockwise. And since I have some coals on the bottom, I'll do the same thing the other direction.
Unveiling these biscuits was a treat for all the senses. The biscuits were very light, they had a delightful aroma, and a texture that is above and beyond any that I've baked before. The butter really accomplished its task by helping create all these fantastic layers and releasing its steam to create a perfect lightness. The flavor was all I hoped it would be. Regardless of all the butter in the mix, I added a little tap of butter to my biscuit before a spoonful of jam. Please do yourself a favor and try this recipe. You deserve this treat. I can honestly say that these were among the best biscuits I have ever eaten. Please leave me your comments below and let me know your experience with this wonderful recipe for light, flaky, delicious, buttery Dutch oven biscuits.